Hello, we are here to present our data analysis for DataFest 2025. Our team is Sign Me Up. I'm Clark Wu.
I'm Cindy. I'm Pauline.
I'm Leia.
This is the agenda of our presentation. Now we proceed to our first section, data overview and methodology description. Our data consists of two types, internal and external data. Internal data is data providing the existing data set, and external data is data we find. We'll then perform two analysis on them and focus on two parameters. We'll also perform a brief event study on COVID shock. We mainly took use of two data frames, leases and price and availability. We filtered this data focusing on 10 major target markets and large spaces. We then merged two data frames, passing the market value information to individual buildings. We then integrated internal and external data to get our final clean data training data. And during this process, we found some significant trends. This plot shows list volume versus occupancy trends over time. We can see that in early 2020, list SF plummets, but occupancy remains relatively stable. In 2021, 2022, leasing rebound begins, and after that, everything stabilizes. This plot shows how transaction type proportion changes over time. We can see new is still the largest type, but after COVID periods, proportion of new decreased dramatically with increases renewal proportion. Now we proceed to the second section, peer-to-peer factor analysis. The goal is to analyze each factor's correlation to list SF. This is the structure of internal data focuses. This chart shows that while tech leasing took the hardest hits in 2020, it rebounded sharply by 2022, whereas legal remained steadily throughout, and finance began a more gradual recovery post-2022.
So from the previous leasing trend, we discovered that tech companies shows a more dramatic decrease after the COVID, probably due to the change of working mode into remote and hybrid way. And then we perform a difference model indicating that in pre-COVID period, tech and non-tech has a similar trend, but shows a distinctive trend after the COVID, especially that the tech company is decreasing its amount in the leasing space. And then move on to the RBA and the lease space. We saw there's a high correlation in the general market and also in each of the sub-market. Specifically, there's a strong demographical correlations in all of this in two indicators. And then we move on to the average leasing rent and the internal clause. We've seen that the average rent and the lease space shows a strong negative correlation, especially during the spike in the COVID when the leasing decreases. And also, after looking at the rent of the different classes of leasing, they follow actually the similar patterns over time, but the rent of the different class shows a distinctive patterns, while the high qualities brings a greater rents, but the lower has a decreasing when the market recovered.
So after looking at internal data, we also look into external data, including consumer price index, construction spending, government subsidy, unemployment rate, and stock price. So using CPI, we found that financial services has resilient demands in terms of CPI, legal services is steady across inflation, while tech services has leasing fluctuates over the time. As for transaction type share versus CPI indicators, we found that high CPI tends to have more relocations, not renewals, surprisingly. In terms of leasing trends versus government subsidy, found that government subsidy usually peak early, but only the tech sector rebounded. And legal financial leasing remained flat, which implies that long-term shifts are in office-based demand. In terms of transaction type versus government subsidies, technology services tend to expand during recovery phases, while legal and financial services have renewal leases while subsidies support peaks. And in terms of leasing trends versus construction spending, we found that technology services leasing consistently led construction, while legal and financial services show periods where construction led leasing. And lastly, transaction type versus construction spending, we found that technology firm, again, their leasing consistently led construction, while legal and financial services are the other case.
Finally, the unemployment rate shows a strong negative correlation with the lease SF over time. Well, but looking at each of the market, excluding the COVID period point, there are certain markets like DC and PA actually showing a positive correlation among unemployment rate and the lease SF.
We train different models to analyze the factors' relation to lease interest. To prepare for our models dataset, we first carefully select reasonable internal and external factors Then we aggregated rows that share the same market, house quality, CBD, and company industry. We defined least interest as our target result to predict. Least interest is defined using the sum of least square foot times a weighted determined by transaction type. For example, a new lease or an expansion can indicate a strong lease interest than renewal. We then split the dataset. 80% of the dataset is used for training and 20% for testing. First, we used linear regression as a baseline approach. We achieved a 0.61 R2 score, which indicates the model can cover 61% of the variance. We analyzed the most significant features based on the p-values. A smaller p-value indicates a stronger correlation. Linear regression model shows the most important factors are RBA, available space, government subsidy, government spending in construction, and market. We also used random forests to explore nonlinear patterns. We achieved a slightly better R2 score, similar to linear regression. RBA, available space, construction spending, and government subsidy are important features. Random forests also discovered the significance of rent prices. To better understand the decision pattern of the model, we further choose to use a decision tree. From the zoomed section of the tree, we can briefly understand the important factors. Closer to the root, RBA plays an important role in decision making, and as decision proceeds, other factors start to matter, such as rent prices, employment rate, and CPI.
So based on our results analysis, we would like to make some recommendations. First of all, in terms of when to lease or relocate, we will recommend to watch for signals like government subsidy or CPI moderation. And so if you lease too early, you might risk low demand. Also, where to lease, you might want to prioritize high quality assets like Class A buildings. And normally business have more renewals and relocations post 2020. And we also find that leasing trends are tied to CPI and other indicators. And lastly, we found that tech services recovers faster from the pandemic, while legal and financial service have a slower pace in terms of this.
So finally, we think our model of decision tree and the multilinear regression could be potential to help the clients to forecast the lease space, given clients' preferences over geolocations, features of local markets, government policies, internal industry, the rent preferences, and also the quality of the lease.
So the following are appendix that includes more information of our data analysis, and also our references are at the end. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.